Hey guys, what's up? It's Cole, and as a part of the media tour, we did a question and answer period, and this video is going to be focused right on that. However, there were very clear limitations. I'm not allowed to show you the slides with the questions on them, or like to directly give you the answers, or like the recordings of the answer. So you are going to be getting very heavily paraphrased answers here. I'm going to, however, do my best to do justice towards the answers. Q&A period was roughly an hour, and let's see if I can do a super condensed summary of all the answers here. The first question is asking, are there any examples of improved rewards going into Dawntrail, which is something that the developers did mention in previous live letters was going to be a focus of this expansion. The answer is that Final Fantasy XIV has expanded on the types of content with stuff like variant dungeons, and that the one piece of feedback that they got very clearly was that variant dungeon rewards weren't really that great for the majority of players, so one element they want to improve on in Dawntrail is to improve the number of items given, and so that doesn't just mean minions, and that they really want to expand upon this. They also want content that feels different from standard content. They didn't really elaborate too much on that, but they may not provide max item levels, but they want like middleman content to fill in that gap between the lower item levels and get towards higher item levels. But they were saying that they do expect to increase the number of gear sets that they offer as rewards. The second question is tackling the thing that you definitely notice even if you're like just doing extreme trials, is that Aether has a lot of people come onto the Aether data center to access the Aether party finder, which has a lot more people in raiding, which makes it easier to farm PF groups. The second part of this question is really asking, is there any attempts to like improve the current friend system in game, like citing Blizzard's battle.net? The answer for this is that they are very aware that players want these changes, but being able to do party finders and matching systems would need to be a separate system, and of course it would solve a ton of these problems, but it may take 2 to 3 years of work, and they're wondering if there may be potentially another innovative solution to this that we haven't really thought about. But currently they are focused on 7.0 development, but once they get over the major hurdle of that, they want to talk about this and really hash out these problems in more depth. For the friends list stuff, they want to focus first on improving the blacklist features. My extrapolation is just to protect people, because that has definitely been a problem for a lot of people. However, the developers did say that they want to improve the friends list system from here. The third question is talking about new player experience and low level gameplay, and that basically there are very few skills and that you really take a while to get to the end game and where you actually have a full rotation. I think the classic example, which is not something they asked in the question, would be like looking at Dragoon, which is kind of I'd say even Pictomancer, if you look at like the skills from level 1 and onwards, it's kind of it takes a while to get a little bit online, and so that's what this question is addressing. To answer the third question, they were talking about how it's really about striking a balance, that as a role-playing game, you really do expect your character to progress, and that now we have level 1 all the way to 100, that it's going to be really kind of tricky to, as you level up, you want like a reward from a skill, but you also want to ensure that lower level players aren't obviously getting bored, but you also don't want to just have like a flood of skills and kind of like that they're trying to like strike the right balance. And they did say that they are very open towards feedback and hearing stuff about particular jobs and ways that they might be able to resolve it. But yeah, that right now that they're just trying to play like a balancing game here. Because if you give everything at low of a level, well, what do you give like mid or high level? And then like, okay, like what about like rotations and stuff like that? The third question is asking like a lore question of like, is there any particular quest or anything that you would recommend, or asking the developers if they would recommend in order to get ready for Dawntrail. So the developers' answer towards this is that in general that there's a lot of lore in the game, and wouldn't someone super into the lore like already have done most of it, but they did recommend Myths of the Realm, which is like that Alliance raid series. And then they asked the question, can you name all of the 14 seats of the Convocation? And the answer is no. They didn't answer that, but no, I don't think we can. The next question is asking, what were some of the inspirations for Dawntrail? So their answer honestly was super deep and super touching, so I'm going to try and do it a little bit of justice while not directly like quoting it at all. But basically like the inspiration is Summer Vacation for the Warrior of Light, and through Endwalker we did a lot, like they said, going through the Edge of Existence, restoring the 13th of Void storyline with 0, but 14 is starting to feel a little samey story-wise and similar, and so they want to shift up things and go back to the first, our planet, go experience new cultures, new adventures, and really go with a bit of a lighter vacation feel versus a very, very heavy Endwalker feeling. Looking at even the real world with very serious and sad news going on, they want to focus on in 14 in players and how like even within players, how you can have different people with different values of you, and if you like look at things in like modern times and use Final Fantasy XIV to depict like different values and different cultures and get to like a mutual understanding of others. And they're hoping that this could like connect us, like that the story could connect to us in real life and our futures and inspire things like connections to other people and their values and histories and cultures. And they did say, however, in spite of the summer vacation thing, that there is going to definitely be exciting battles and twists, which they already showed us some examples of that in the live letter coverage, to say the least. Like that Cyberpunk city still has me going, what? The next question is a lot, but it basically boils down to melee gear currently is spread out amongst all the different jobs in different sets. Like you have Ninja and now Viper sharing a set. You have the separate ranged accessories with them. You have the striking sets. You have the maiming sets for Dragoon. And is there any look to simplify that system? Should also add that this is talking about different melds, like skill speed melds and different like skill speed breakpoints. Like, because I can't say the question directly, I'm kind of leading you towards it, just like the complexity of like the melee sets, and like if there could be like a simplification on all that. So the direct answer to this question actually kind of answers two questions, but I'm gonna get into this main first part. So Yoshi P says that he could see the problem happening for sure for melee DPS, but as the director of the game, he's not sure on the balance between oversimplifying things, which may reduce a lot of joy from a lot of people, because remember, a lot of people do like the theory crafting end of things, and a lot of people have actually been giving feedback about the theory crafting and like build craft and stuff. So, and that's my exposition adding into that, but I know that that feedback has been around. But Yoshi P is also like, okay, do we oversimplify it, or like do we add more depth, and kind of like striking the balance on that is very important. And so the goal is to improve the gameplay and content satisfaction with rewards in 7.0, and then like look at like potentially a new fresh perspective for jobs, which is getting into that second part of this question that I've got to get into soon. This circles back to gear sets in that they want to be cautious about oversimplifying things too far, and say if you trivialize the materia gameplay mechanics, there is a lot of questioning around will that reduce the enjoyment, but the development team has been eyeing the materia system to expand and improve upon it. Now we're going to get under what I'm going to call job homogenization answer, because this was actually put under that question, and so I am completely shifting it to his own thing. So when Yoshi P was answering the gear set and melee materia and other thing question, we basically had him answer and talk about like the battle content has had a lot of criticism raised against it, that there are mechanics that seem very similar, and that sometimes player feedback has been harsher for some of the newer mechanics, the different mechanics that have tried to be introduced. And so they did take a few steps back on that, and that they may have gone a little extreme, like the raid boss hit circles being the size of the arena or the size of Narnia. Yes, that really was brought up. Like the boss hit boxes was actually brought up on a giggle. Like this is again exposition, they didn't bring this up, but look at E8S versus P6S, which is a similar model, similar hitbox size, and that is just my own notes, but like very true statement that they made there. But they really want to introduce a new and fresh battle content systems to really shake things up in that domain, and that the feedback has been received on that totally. However, similarly, players have raised criticism about why a particular job has had an action but another doesn't, so the developers really want to be mindful of this. So they really at this point want to ensure that all jobs like are really good and that they're able to tackle the combat content. And in terms of future, though, they said that they want to ensure in the future that jobs will get to their uniqueness and particular flavor, but they don't want to do that while they're also changing the gameplay rewards and systems around the mechanics. And like the content approach might shift too much if they both stack the unique job flavor and the diversity of the job's difficulty, which would add difficulty because you're fundamentally changing a lot of different things and making things maybe a little bit like, well, I guess obviously different, but they didn't want to stack that on top of content difficulty and approach difficulty. Next question is asking, Dawntrail is kind of said in the like live letter and stuff that it's going to be having more of an emphasis on multiplayer content, and they wanted like more examples of that and like what systems would be used to like inspire people to go and do multiplayer content. So this question had awesome answer that I'm going to try and simplify as much as possible, which is that the story being so good in Final Fantasy XIV that they want to get players to actually play Final Fantasy XIV initially, and that they made the preparations to have the trust system to let players who want to play solo do solo play through the main storyline. Like through the trust system, they do get exposed to dungeon content, which is kind of like a simulation of multiplayer content, but in doing so exposes like those new players to more and more of the game systems, which might get them comfortable to do content with other players. And also keeping in mind that these are people who probably wouldn't have even played if there wasn't a solo option at all. But now the developers going into Dawntrail, they are really happy with that side of things, and they feel that they've really done it. And they didn't say it, but I'm thinking like things like Island Sanctuary on top of like the trust system. Like now the developers, however, want to flesh out the bigger MMORPG content and expand upon that a lot. Now there was a question asked by someone in the audience, and they were asking players can be worried about failure, and there is definitely a fear of failure that can impact people wanting to play with other players versus solo, because if you fail, you're then, even if you're not explicitly like shouted at or like called down, like you feel bad, or at least I know I am. And that the question asked about providing players with more tools to help them learn so that they don't need to worry about failing if they're playing with other people. And I think this is a very important question. The answer is that players in Final Fantasy XIV are generally very helpful, and like especially if they see a sprout icon, you might not get like shouted at. Guys, I don't know if that's necessarily true, but however, the developers did say if they get players to play like 14 to even play it at all, that they, if they did not have like the solo play as an option, that it would be much harder to even get them to play the game. And if they do try the game and they can maybe like learn things and experience things like through the trust system, and that the trust system is like really going to allow them to prepare to do content with players and practice with the trust system, which can build confidence. The next question is talking about the level sync system, and there's a whole lot of math in there, and there's a whole lot of ramifications to this, such as UCOB today, if you like go down, that there is a lot of questions around if it is as difficult as before, and the answer is a profound no. We've really seen a significant degradation, especially of UCOB. Like people I think have 5-manned it now, but this isn't something asked, this is just my exposition, but I'm pretty sure I saw someone like a group did 5-man it. People have done it with all tanks, all healers, and that. So these calculations, just like, is there any look at overhauling the system? And I personally would like to see this. So the answer for this question is that the calculation on the system is quite complex and does put some strain on the servers, and that there is definitely a misalignment that the developers themselves have definitely taken note of, with level and materia stats being taken into account, and that the level sync system was originally created in Final Fantasy XI, and then when the level sync system was carried over and brought into like Final Fantasy XIV, there was a definite rush for A Realm Reborn and updating the game after 1.0, and that this is something that they definitely are going to be looking at. The next and final official question is that during like Letter from the Producer lives, that they have talked about how Dawntrail is like the beginning of a new saga, and kind of like what the plans are for Dawntrail's story. Like, is it going to continue? Is it going to be like a decade saga? What's going to go on with that? And so the answer is that the exact thoughts of Dawntrail in the future are unclear right now, and even when they released A Realm Reborn and Heaven's Ward, they weren't focused on exactly what is going on like long term, especially in A Realm Reborn and the harsh reception of 1.0. They really want to focus on excelling in the here and now and bringing players as much joy as possible. And then back then, thinking about like 6.0 and patch 6.0 and expansion, that deep wasn't even in the cards. That was just not even a thing that they were thinking about at that time. However, they definitely did leave a lot of foreshadowing and story elements and hooks that could be put together for a larger, deeper story, and that during 7.0 they are definitely putting in neat blocks and hooks here and there, and that based on player feedback they may gauge where to go from there based on those player reactions to these things. They did state, interestingly enough, that in 7.0 there is some huge secret in there that players will need to find out when they play, and they won't elaborate on what that secret is now, but there are storylines that may even determine the next 2 expansions, and depending on feedback, which cards they're going to take out of the deck of like Dawntrail and play in the future to determine and pave a future for the future expansions really depends on player feedback. However, they made very clear that above and beyond any storyline or anything, or worrying about a saga or this grand elaborate architected master plan, they want to make sure players are happy and excited here and now and going forward into the future. And so really our feedback and making people as happy as possible is the number one thing. And with that concludes the Q&A coverage. And oh my god, there is so much to unpack here. I'm almost torn if I want to do like separate videos on some of these topics, but I'm gonna close off this video. Let me know what you guys think about all this in the questions down, in the comments down below. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I am like so tired. I'm trying to get all these videos and I'm like, but let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I think that some of these answers are super cool.